enter into Ramadan with some goals, with some preparation. We know that, for example, if we're getting ready to get married, many months go into preparing for that one day. Some people spend a whole entire year planning for just a few hours. Plan for Ramadan. Make some goals, make some, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make dua for certain things that you ask Him to enable you to do and to help you to do and accomplish in the month of Ramadan. And the Prophet ﷺ has warned us from making Ramadan or making fasting just about hunger and thirst. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need us just to be hungry and thirsty, but rather there is a deeper meaning that from, in the fast itself. That when we're fasting, we should also not just be fasting from food and drink, but also be fasting from those things that that we normally may do, those sins that that maybe have become habitual for us, and this is our chance to detach from those, to disconnect from those. And we know that the Prophet ﷺ, once there was some women who were fasting from food and drink, but they were actually, they started feeling, upset stomach, and then when they started to release what was inside their stomach, it was as if they had eaten, it was flesh and blood, and it was something that looked as if they had eaten meat. And what the Prophet ﷺ taught us is that those women, although they were fasting from food and drink, they had been backbiting. And so that was the physical manifestation of that lahm, that meat that they had been eating of the one who they were backbiting, as we're told in the Quran, that it's like eating the dead flesh of your brother. So this is something that we should keep in mind, that fasting, let it not be just about hunger and thirst, but that we're also fasting from the other things that displease Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second, a lot of times there's so much focus, ironically, on what we're going to eat for iftar and what we're going to eat for suhoor. And sometimes we, especially as women, get so caught up in cooking these very lavish, huge meals and having lots of social gatherings, that we spend the majority of our time and focus cooking. And then after that, we spend much of our time and stomach eating at iftar, and that pretty much defeats the purpose. One of the purposes of fasting is not to get really hungry and then overeat at iftar, but rather that we're supposed to detach from this focus on food altogether. And so when the companions and the Prophet ﷺ used to have simple iftar, we don't need to. And again, it's good to have time for community and to get together, but this shouldn't be the focus. The focus of iftar, the focus of Ramadan rather, is a time to build our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well as the community. But it isn't, the focus should not be socializing and cooking these very lavish meals and overeating. So something to keep in mind, especially for us women, is not to get so consumed with cooking and socializing and having this hosting people and that kind of thing. Although inshallah it is rewarded, you are rewarded for feeding the fasting person, but just keeping focused that this should be a time for you to build your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to increase in your remembrance and your dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Third, it's very important, and as we enter into Ramadan, there's going to be a lot of different responsibilities that different people have. Again, women have this responsibility of cooking the meals, a lot of times more social invitations, but make sure that you set aside time just alone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and try to have that time every single day, whether it's after salah, in the morning, in the evening. And one of the most blessed times to have that is the time just before Fajr prayer. In the last third of the night, we're told that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends to the lowest heaven and calls out, who is asking from me so I may give him, and who is seeking forgiveness so I may forgive him. And this is the time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is nearest to us. So it's really important to utilize that time to build our relationship with Allah, especially during the blessed month of Ramadan, where the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just showering on us. And I want to just sort of leave put this sort of this idea of imagine a time if you walked outside and you saw that there was money falling from the sky. Imagine that instead of rain, it was actually $100 bills falling from the sky. Imagine how people would act in your household and in your neighborhood. And obviously, what would be happening is everyone would be rushing outside, falling all over themselves, maybe pushing other people to try to get as much of that money as possible. Now, think that in Ramadan, something more precious than $100 bills is falling from the sky, and that's the mercy and forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're told by the Prophet ﷺ that in the month of Ramadan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, it begins with his mercy and forgiveness and then protection from the fire. And so we want to utilize this rain, this pouring of mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and gather as much of it as we can. Number 4, purify yourself and try to use this opportunity to leave whatever sins you may be consistently attached or addicted to. Use this time as a time of purification. It is not just a time of refraining from food and drink, but rather a time to purify ourselves inside and out. So make a point to use this opportunity to leave the sins that you may be committing, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify you. Make it a time of tawbah and a time of repentance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And lastly, enter into Ramadan with some goals, with some preparation. We know that, for example, if we're getting ready to get married, many months go into preparing for that one day. Some people spend a whole entire year planning for just a few hours. Plan for Ramadan. Make some goals, make some ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make dua for certain things that you ask Him to enable you to do and to help you to do and accomplish in the month of Ramadan. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم إنه غفور رحيم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.